Councillor King only seemed to retract when legal action was threatened.
Before I start, can I just say it's very off-putting to see the Leader of the Council rolling his eyes when a member of the public is speaking. I hope you're going to treat me with more respect.
It's not how this council runs. I'm very accountable.
Good evening. Councillor King has mentioned how very accountable he and the council are. Council's accountability seems to be another doesn't do what it says on the tin scenario. I'd be interested to know how this is to be achieved in practice, as the public observation and feedback would demonstrate an accountability deficit embedded in our governance system. One only has to Google list UK government scandals to recognise that serious lack of accountability has been going on for far too long. Indeed, was my driver to speak at council. Officers behind the scenes make decisions and steer councillors. Where is their accountability? The chair of the scrutiny panel admits to having no effective powers. Libelous comments of far-right extremists and conspiracy cranks are bandied about on social media by councillors, seemingly unanswerable to this misconduct in public office. The monitoring officer works for the council. Independent persons tend to come from other councils. Bias is to be expected from those marking their own work. Ombudsman's powers are limited, so they aren't able to hold the council fully to account. Councillor King was asked to clarify any lawful basis for the searches as a condition of entry. He responded by saying, "I'm not going to have an attempt to try and establish who, around the table or away from this place, is responsible for what set of conditions. I appreciate that middle-aged women in cardigans revealing unwanted information that could cause discomfort to the councillors may be viewed as fearful, but I'm not sure that necessitates a body and bag search at the taxpayers' expense every time I come to have my say." Demonstration material is being searched for. Demonstration is defined as an act of showing that something exists or is true by giving proof of evidence. Interesting that this is not allowed. Perhaps that is why the experts on climate change were not allowed to speak via Zoom. Council would then have evidence publicised that demonstrates the absolute folly of net zero central government is pushing us towards. A member of the public was shut down and police called to have him removed. Although some stated his speech to be vexatious, I found it insightful. New rules for Have Your Say mean that speeches need to be approved. Who gets to choose who is allowed to speak in this council's definition of democracy? Councillor King made a false statement about the safety of 5G. The monitoring officer agrees that the word safe isn't used anywhere in the documentation. We are still waiting for a retraction and correction. So far, no accountability on that, nor the 360 debacle. Recently, there's been the wasting of yet more taxpayers' money. How is it even possible to have a tax bill for £375,000 for a council-owned company that made a loss? So it seems that council or councillors or council officers are not required to justify their actions or decisions and are not responsible for results or consequences. Is anyone? Thank you.
I probably will divert to the leader, but I'm going to say a few words. First of all, I agree with you on £400,000 going to HMRC in that scenario is not a good look, is it, at all? So I agree with you on that one. On the Have Your Says, there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between us being effective in here and giving the public a platform to have their say. So it's striking the right balance. That's just my observation. On the bag searches and potential body searches, I'm just going to double down on what I think I've previously said. I support the administration. I'm the chairman of scrutiny. I support the administration in their direction to officers doing that, because I think that on balance, most people in here take comfort in knowing that people are searched on entry into the building. And if I may say, if they'd been a bit better at searching bags in the West End last night, we wouldn't have seen Just Stop Oil people jumping on stage and disrupting culture and art for people in their cause. So, you know, bag searches can be effective if used properly, on your specific point about material for demonstrations. And finally, you know, all of us in here who are elected to be the part-time junior politicians that we are, you know, we were all bound by the Nolan principles in public life. Some people have been before the Standards Committee before for saying things on the internet that have been, you know, not perhaps in line with those principles. So there is that over our shoulders, and we all do our best. But I will, because you've raised some specifics, look to the leader to see if he wants to add anything or not. It's over to you, leader.
My name was mentioned a few times. Perhaps I'll just say that I'm in the same position. I know this clearly isn't your view that you suggest that we're beyond accountability, but it doesn't feel that way. The electorate hold us accountable, and we work within a legal statutory framework, and I know that some people don't like that, don't agree with it, but it is what it is. Whatever is the law of the land and the governance of the land, we do our very best. As somebody who's been involved and hasn't always felt very fruitful in lots of exchanges around controversial subjects such as 5G, I've been prepared to accept that my phrasing could have been different, and I put my hand up to that, and I spent personal time and effort, and it is a choice in going back to people to try and find an understanding. And I actually spoke in full council to acknowledge a difference where I could have taken perhaps a better choice of words. I tried to choose them well. Our intentions are honourable here. We recognise our duty to the public, personally and collectively, and we do our best to exercise it. And I think that's probably all I can say. Thank you.
Isn't it interesting that the balance seems to always sway towards the favour of the council? The reason why we keep coming back is because we aren't getting answers that are satisfactory, and there isn't an accountability, and what it seems like is actually we're trying to be hindered from coming and making the council accountable. Councillor King only seemed to retract when legal action was threatened. I had provided evidence that 5G was unsafe and suggested to the Councillor King he could retract that in the previous full council. He chose not to. So I am suggesting that your phrasing was inaccurate, and by not retracting that the first time of requesting, you're being deliberately misleading. We are not living under the rule of law, but international rules-based system, and this is why there is becoming a conflict between the public, who are no longer interested in the divisions between left and right, but are seriously concerned about the right and wrong that's going on within our governance system. Things are going to need to change. Thank you.
Before I start, can I just say it's very off-putting to see the leader of the council rolling his eyes when a member of the public speaking. I hope you're going to treat me with more respect. Okay, so good evening. Mercury Theatre receives £170,000 a year of council funding. Since 2023, I've been raising many safeguarding concerns, including the Mercury platform in children's performers whose material incites violence against women and includes sexually explicit, developmentally inappropriate and politically divisive content. Attempts to hold the Mercury to account through elected representatives have proven ineffective. I raised these concerns during last year's budget process, but the council failed to act. Since then, the Mercury has issued an intimidating, discriminatory and defamatory public statement policing the speech of women with lawful views on child safeguarding and violence against women, labelling as dangerous hate mongers. It's continued to allow unrestricted access to its toilets, leading to an ongoing police investigation into threatening behaviour by a man in the women's toilets. We're told to use the disabled if we feel unsafe. It's persisted in socially transitioning children in its youth groups without parental knowledge or consent, contrary to NHS and schools guidance and the CAST review recommendations. As a parent raising safeguarding concerns, my experience has been being misled, smeared and harassed. Last March, I had to report the Mercury to the police over concerns for my safety. This escalated to my arrest on allegations of harassment and criminal damage. My home was searched, my DNA tested against stickers, my phone confiscated for 11 weeks, and I was barred from entering a whole area of the city before the CPS rejected these bogus allegations. The video of my arrest has been viewed 1.6 million times on X, damaging Colchester's reputation and undermining the council's pledge to work with partners to create a vibrant city which people want to live in and visit. The law prohibits charities from engaging in political activism outside their objectives, yet the Mercury board of 9 men and 3 women fails to reflect the council's aims for diverse and representative governance. Surveys show strong public support for single-sex spaces, but the Mercury disregards this and the law, compounding risks to women and children. Your public sector equality duty requires you to have regard for the elimination of discrimination, harassment and victimisation, the fostering of good relations between protected groups, and considering negative impacts on protected groups in all decisions. I ask the Council to commit to these 4 actions. 1, conduct a thorough review of the Mercury's compliance with its grant funding agreement. 2, consider alternatives for the £170,000, prioritising services that directly benefit residents or supporting businesses that respect the law and their customers. 3, introduce safeguarding and equality audits for grant recipients and strengthen mechanisms for accountability. And 4, invest in high-quality training on equality law. Misunderstanding equality law has contributed to systemic failures nationally, disproportionately affecting women and children. In the midst of an epidemic of violence against women and children, Colchester's funding must prioritise safety, fairness and respect, not division and harm. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming along to have your say. As I said to the previous speaker, your words are being noted as a matter of public record. You have just been broadcast live on the internet, and that video will be there in perpetuity. I'll try and respond a little bit as best I can. I'm personally, not someone that spends too much time going to cabaret or drag artist, performance artist things. That's not something that I typically do with my spare leisure time. Equally, you won't find me in the queue to see the Dream Boys at Charter Hall. But who am I to deny people who want to see that kind of performance? It's not for me to call it. But the thrust of what you've suggested is around safeguarding concerns. So I'm, as a parent, naturally concerned, and I listen intently to what you said. And I think probably actually you raise an area which I feel a bit ignorant on, because as an authority, obviously grants are given to organisations to create events, to put on performances and what have you, and that's Fairsight, that's the Mercury Theatre, that's Colchester Arts Centre. We even have events in our museums, which are also publicly subsidised, albeit to a very small amount. So I would hope that any grant funding or frankly, any partnering that this authority has with any third party, and I can think very clearly about the recent situation with the volunteering sector, that we take assurance that safeguarding practices are good and that equalities legislation, probably Human Rights Act as well, is respected. How that happens mechanically and technically, whether there is an agreement, you've suggested potentially retrospective audits. I don't know if we do anything at the moment, and I'm going to look to probably Mrs. Bredman in the room as a senior officer, who I know has always been very helpful in supporting the portfolio holder for culture over the years. Is there a mechanic in place that we can take comfort in knowing that money is given to organisations to do things that are appropriate and respects basic safeguarding, for example? Could you give us a brief insight, if you may, and then obviously I'll let you come back.
Yes, so the 3 art grants that we give out, there is a process every year where we do a funding review. The portfolio holder and I will start that process next week with the 3 partners. There is a funding agreement as well in place. There is a requirement for safeguarding and equality and diversity policy to be in place. And indeed, you'll remember yourselves that scrutiny, usually annually, is going to be biannually as well. You do actually scrutinise our arts partners and the funding that they receive. So that's the kind of mechanism for us to check the funding specifically for the arts. Is that, I don't know if the portfolio holder or leader wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, Geraldine. So I have looked through your complaints, but as I say, the complaints have been investigated by the Mercury, and I've used their published complaints procedure and engaged with senior staff and trustees in the process. They've been keeping us informed at every stage. So you've been asked before if you would raise these complaints with the Charity Commission. Have you done that yet?
It's the responsibility of the trustees of the Mercury to self-refer to the Charity Commission. There's no responsibility upon me. Your responsibility as funders is to uphold your public sector equality duty. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. the Charity Commission is just a distraction and it has nothing, it's not relevant to you.
That was the recommendation to you, so if we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Very briefly, if you want to respond to me, but I am being generous here.
Yeah, I would I'd like to say a few things. I'm not talking about adult entertainment here, which is what you mentioned. And having a policy is not evidence of having good practice. Their policy is inadequate, but their practice is much more inadequate. And bringing them here once a year to mark their own homework is also inadequate, because all they do is come and tell you, well, what about all the good things that they do? That's not what the public sector equality duty is about. And it's not true what you said about the complaints and the complaints process. It's absolutely not true.